Yes, he's going to give a talk.
Hey, how are you? How are you? All right. I'm just trying to record.
You're doing your Skype.
No. I'm recording for myself. All right. I'm going to the cloud.
Okay.
But with the memory stick,
Yeah, I'll put it in here.
So I am going.
What assistance you need?
No, I'll say what I need first. So I wanted to. So is there that thing on the side for me to? Yes. Then I would rather have that.
All right. Is the presentation on the USB?
Yeah, it is.
Which one is it saying? Oh. Where's that USB? Is it plugged in? What's it? Yeah. Is it? Yeah. Okay, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome. I'll take your photos of you. Welcome back, everyone. I'm exceptionally delighted to welcome Dr. Fundile Nyati to the Wits Business School, who has been kind enough to take time off his very busy schedule to come here and spend the next 1.5 hours or so to talk about his entrepreneurial journey. He's been an entrepreneur for the last 20 years, having previously served as a medical practitioner, somebody who studied medicine and went on to do family medicine, and also studied in the UK, where he did his management studies at the University of Manchester. So he's somebody who's branched from medical practice to entrepreneurship in the healthcare sector. So this is a story he's going to relate to us, how this went about, why in the first place he decided to leave medical practice to become an entrepreneur, and what concerns did he have about this transition? How did he go about establishing this business? It's called Active Health Services. He and his partners, they have a very diversified client base, customer base, in the state-owned enterprises, in the private sector, in the public sector. He's a very well-known figure, in South Africa, highly sought after speaker. As I said, he's a resident guest, on 702, Radio 702. I do listen to the program, especially when he's going to talk about how to reduce obesity, because he always goes on about my sugar intake and other people's sugar intake and why it's important to. So he's very generous with advice, but so he's going to tell us about his entrepreneurial journey, and then we will then open the floor for questions and comments, and what lessons to glean from his experience, and then we will close for lunch. So this is how it's going to happen. I'm happy again to welcome you, Fundile. We are really, really delighted to have you here. And let me mention this as if this is not important. We hosted your brother here, your older brother, Fundile Nyati, who's the CEO of Altron. I think you were there. You were there, and we hosted him to launch his book, and it was a fantastic launch. And it's a great pleasure to have you both having blessed this place. Thank you so much.
I've never been in a room with so many MBA people. I'm feeling a bit anxious, but anyway, where I come from, once you've been welcomed, then you can take off your jacket. So can I take off my jacket?
You're welcome.
Yeah. So I'll just go through who I am, because I think when you lead and manage people, it's always important that you do so in an authentic manner. You must not be fake. And so I always tell people where I come from, so that they understand why I make certain decisions, why I prefer certain things. So originally from the Eastern Cape, born in a place called Ngeleni, one of those small towns with one street, Nota. At the age of 4 or 5, we moved to Mthatha, which is a bigger town in the Eastern Cape. My parents were both teachers. And so my dad's, job was to set up schools. Once they work well, he moves to another place and set up a school. And so we used to move like that. But so I grew up in Mthatha, went to St. John's College, which is one of the best public schools in the Eastern Cape. And when I was there, I obviously knew that I wanted to do medicine. From the age of 4, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. Because next door to my home in the rural village was a clinic. And so when these people come for antenatal, classes, that is pregnant people, most ladies, those who've already been pregnant, you know that you have to see a doctor or a nurse at least once a month. So when they're hungry, they'll go next door to our shop. We had a general dealer store in my village. And if I was not at school, then I was behind the counter serving those people. And so the closeness to the clinic, the fact that the vaccines for the clinic were kept at my home because they didn't have a freezer there, and the fact that I was also, in the shop. So I had those two influences, the health influence, but also the entrepreneurial, influence. And so, but in terms of career, my dad always had a dream to become a medical doctor. He was actually accepted to go and study medicine in 1948 or 49 when they were starting the medical school in Natal. Because before then, there was no medical school for black people. He got recruited there and only discovered, by like 6 months that no men were being recruited to become what is called mid-level workers. That is something that's above a nursing qualification, but below a medical, qualification. They call them auxiliary doctors. Protested, they kicked him out. So he had to go back home to the family profession, which is teaching. But that thing within him, of wanting to be a doctor, he tried with my big brother. Those who read his book, they will know that he talks a lot about how he was forced to become a doctor, and he had to say, no, I want to be an engineer. But when he came to me, he came to fertile ground. I love things, I love things. And those days, doctors were these people who had the biggest house, the biggest car, and generally well respected in society. I'm talking in the past because it's not the situation now, And so I thought, that's the kind of life I want, But also the fact that I just enjoyed interactions with patients, from the clinic. So he didn't need to convince me for me to become a doctor. So I applied to Natal Medical School. For those days, it was Natal and Medunsa, Medical University of Africa. Wits, just maybe 1 or 2 people at a time. UCT, those days did not accept, Black Africans, to study medicine. And the Africans medical schools, obviously that was even a bigger problem. And so I did medicine, qualified in 1989. So it's been 30 years that I've been a medical doctor. And when I finished in 1989, I was like, which specialty do I want to take? I wasn't sure whether I could have done any of those. I thought, let me go and make a bit of money, 5 years, and I'll come back and study. 5 years, I went back to medical school and said, I want to do dermatology. There's problems with the skin because I didn't want to do calls at night, So I wanted a profession where there's no emergencies. You hardly ever have any emergencies for dermatology. So, but when I got there, they only had 2 positions that had just been filled. So I needed to wait another 4 years for one of those people to pass before I could go in. So I said, no, I had promised myself I'm going to study. So what else can I do? Oh, there was family medicine, which had just been introduced in Natal. Family medicine, it's a specialty where a doctor learns all the common conditions in all disciplines, gynae, pediatrics, orthopedics, but common, uncomplicated conditions. So you become what is referred to as a generalist. And now in other countries like Canada, UK, Australia, you cannot be a GP if you don't have a family medicine qualification. And so I thought, let me do this in the meantime. Then when they call me for dermatology, hopefully I'll get the position and I'll have finished this thing. So yeah, I finished it. But by the time I finished it, I was like, I'm not sure if I really need to specialize, you know, and from being broad, now I must be narrow and have this depth, you know, of one discipline of medicine. So I thought, no. And my brother had just finished MBA here. And talking to him, there was something exciting about this MBA, you know. I thought, what would happen if I mix MBA and medicine? Maybe that's the route I should take. And so when they phoned me to say, you've got a position for dermatology, I said, I've changed my mind. I want to go and do an MBA, but I wanted an MBA in healthcare. And Stellenbosch had a program, but that program was undersubscribed, so it was closed. So the next thing was, okay, who else can offer something close to this? And then Manchester Business School had a 1-year map, and I enrolled on that, and it was focused in healthcare. So I did that by 98, 99. So by the time I finished that, I was very sure that I don't want to spend another day in medical practice. That is sitting at the surgery, waiting for patients to come. Half of those who come on a Monday, they are looking for sick notes because they are not really sick. And I was like, how can I spend 9 years of my studies and come and sit here and be an accessory to crime? So really, I was not enjoying that. And number 2, there was a lot of change that was happening in the healthcare industry. Those who remember Dr. Nkosazana Zuma, she introduced a lot of changes, stopping doctors from prescribing meds, you know, and all of that. And medical aids were starting to have financial problems, so you get paid like by 90 days if you are lucky, but you have to pay your suppliers in 30 days. So you had to rely on a bank overdraft and all of that. And when they pay, usually they should pay you. So no man, my financial position is getting worse. I'm seeing more patients, but it's not happening. So yeah, so those are just some of the things that then said, you know what, I struggled with the fact that I thought medicine was a calling, right? Now, if I have to move away from medicine, I'm not straying away from my calling. And anyway, I eventually figured it out that I can apply the knowledge in a different setting. I don't have to be in a medical surgery to actually apply my knowledge. So I made the transition. At this moment, I've just registered with UKZN to do a PhD in psychiatry. Part of that, you know, when my dad passed on, before he passed on, he said, if any of you guys, or if none of you guys go beyond the master's level, you must know you didn't take the family forward, because he had, you know, could go on to that level. So there's 4 of us at home. Nteto was not interested in doing a PhD. He's doing very well in business. My younger sister and younger brother, not really interested in that as well. I thought, okay, even if I'm on the other side of 50, I think I should do it, just to respond to the challenge, even if he's no longer alive. So, yeah. So in 1999, I then set up a company called Proactive Health Solutions, or PHS, which is basically, okay, that's my logo that I'll be using often. But anyway, guys, that's rural area. That's the trading store that we had in rural Transkei. Even if you read in Teto's book, you will see that that shop. That's where I learned foundation of entrepreneurship and what makes a successful entrepreneur. That's the clinic that's now new, but the old one was just a prefab type of clinic. And that's my dad who put pressure, who's still putting pressure even though he's on the other side. So yeah, so the first one is Mteto, who's at Altron. We were in a graduation ceremony for my brother, electronics engineer at UKZN. That's my younger sister, who's a physiotherapist. And that's me before I lost my hair. All right. So that's my small family. My wife. I had to go to Limpopo to find a wife. You know, all the way from the same place. All right. And that's my daughter, 13 years old. And that's my son, who's just qualified at MIT with engineering and computer sciences. Sorry. Yeah. Electronic engineering and computer sciences. So he is now trying a startup with some friends in the US. Right, so that's when he qualified, June 2018. So like my dad, I was like, no what, I can't just go to a graduation thing. I must bring my staff as well. It must cross my heart. You know? One that way, one that way. That's how we roll. Okay, so anyway, so your son. Oh, which one then? Oh, hey. So, you know, when you send your kids to some of these places, they become global citizens. So my son met a lady who comes from that group of, what do you call them, Kardashians. What do you call them now? Armenians. Right? So that young lady is an Armenian, speaks Russian and Georgian. Yeah, so I don't know how they communicate with my son. So yeah, so I had to be, you know, a father-in-law instantly because she couldn't sit with him, you know, during the grad. So I had to then be there and look after her. And where I come from, you don't meet. There's some serious stuff that we negotiated, but I had to actually just, you know, go with the flow. All right, so yeah, so that's, her name is Siranush, her name is Babakanova. Yeah, all right. Anyway, so that's me and my brother in the rural areas. You can see some sheep there at the back. I had a knife that was ready to, you know, do some slaughtering. Okay, let me be serious now. So about the business, our business is an employee health and wellness company. Most people don't understand that space because they always confuse it with medical aid. You know, medical aid business is really health insurance. Somebody takes insurance to say, in the event that I get sick, then you will pay my bills. That's what it is. Now, employee health and wellness, it's really a space, a niche space within healthcare, where employers, they actually put up programs in the workplace to try and mitigate the negative impact of health risks. For example, sick notes are a risk to business because when so many people don't come to work, it costs the company money, it costs the company reputation, they have to have overtime or temp workers and all of that. So that's a business risk. If a company like Murray and Roberts, you know, there was the crash of the bridge next to Santee and their employees, you know, were involved there. Now that's an occupational health risk. So it needs to be managed because in South Africa, all employers are supposed to provide a safe and healthy work environment for all their employees. So it means they need to have programs in place to identify risks, communicate risk, manage the risk so that they don't have problems. So that's the second risk test. The other one, somebody maybe who's a driver at Metro Rail, in their 20 years of working there, they will have killed a number of people, who throw themselves in front of the train, all right? And that emotional trauma over a period of time makes them to get to a point where they want to exit on account of post-traumatic stress. So that's a health risk. That's a health risk, and it needs to be managed, but you're not gonna do what you do at the surgery to manage that. You need to look at the organization and find ways to mitigate that. Also, we're seeing a lot of people who have got mental illnesses in our workplaces. At least 25% of people who are working in South Africa have got a mental illness, right? So 1 in 4 of people who are working in South Africa have got a mental illness. Now, the issue that is even serious there is that 25 out of 100, of that 25, only a quarter actually are seeking help and treatment. So 75% of them, because of issues of stigma and all of that, fear about their careers and progression, they don't come forward. So we've got a lot of people who are present at work, but who are actually not productive. So a company like ours, therefore, will then go in and try and find ways to introduce programs that will increase awareness, deal with stigma, and all of that, and ensure that those people are supported. Okay, so I was just trying to show you some of the ways. So that's the work that we do, public sector, state-owned enterprises, and also government departments. So, yeah, so about my journey then, started in that general dealer shop where I was serving customers, I was doing stock control. Yes, because I was under the age of 16, But coming back from school, that's where you go. Before you go to school, you go to the, to the bakery to buy fresh bread and fresh, veggies to be sold in the shop. So that was my life. Before I can go to school, I must make sure that there's fresh bread and there's fresh milk and there's fresh whatever. And that actually made our business to be different to the ones in the locality because stuff was fresh, So I went to medical school. At medical school, really, there is nothing that develops one's entrepreneurial skills there or business skills. And so whilst at the time you start medical school, after you finish grade 12, you're one of the best brains around. You got 7 A's and all of that. But when you get to medical school, you get blunted a little bit in terms of your skills. You got depth in terms of the medical skills and what is required for you to practice as a doctor. But anything else outside of that, really, so the ability to think strategically, the ability to think out of the box, issues around emotional intelligence and all of those things, nothing develops those things, right? Also, basics around accounting, to know what's an income statement, what's a balance sheet, what's the difference between a profit and a turnover. You know nothing about those things. Yet when you come out, you get faced with having to deal with money. And there's so many people who want to make money with you. Insurance people, banking people, they throw all lots of credit because you are supposed to be credit worthy. And within no time, you find yourself in trouble, especially with the taxmen. Most of the guys, they only realize 3 years later that I was underpaying tax. And when SARS comes, they want their money. And when they can't get their money, they garnish your medical aid. So all the money you make in the medical aids goes straight to SARS because they've got, ability to do that. And so that's what you do when you finish medical school. So went to GP practice, learned some skills, trial and error, managing that small thing. So it is still an entrepreneurial venture, but it's more of a professional entrepreneurial venture and you don't really handle lots of money there. If you're doing well, maybe R1 million per annum, all right? So then when I went back to do family medicine, then I studied practice management, which was a little bit better than what we did at undergrad. So that was a little bit of some business skills there, but still very rudimentary. But once I did the map, I then decided, no, I'm now ready to go to the big league. That is to start a business consulting venture in healthcare. And so, yes, I started that company. Now, one of the challenges of setting up a company, obviously, I just needed to first identify the gap. So whilst I was doing the program, I was already using the skills. I'm sure you guys, you also have acquired skills. Some of you are already doing your business plans and stuff. So I identified a gap in the market, and I thought that's the gap I'm going to exploit, because insurers are crying in terms of the high claims rate from employers. All right. On the other hand, employers are crying that they are having to pay high premiums and they don't know how to reduce the health risk. And I thought, if I come in between the insurers, the health insurers, whether it's mental aid or life insurers, if I come in between the two, then I think it's an area I can exploit. So that's what I developed my concept on. I needed people who will pay. I needed not to be dependent on medical aids, So the other challenge was to get business partners. Right? Fine, now I know what I want to do, but I can't do this thing alone. Yes, I've got some MAP qualification, but I don't really have experience to manage things at a bigger level. So talked to some of my colleagues who are doctors. They were not really enthusiastic, to leave the comfort zone into the unknown. So I ended up having to find people like you, well, maybe there may be some doctors around here, yeah, but to find people who were non-medical, but who had experience in business management and business leadership. MBA from Stellenbosch and MBL from UNISA. So the three of us together, we were the founding directors of the business and the founding shareholders. So the next thing then was to say, okay, how do we then find money for this thing? We go to the banks, but the banks are going to look for collateral, and we're not so strong financially. It's not going to work. And if we need to compete with people like Alexander Forbes, Sanlam, Metropolitan, Old Mutual, then we need to have deep pockets. So how else do we raise, this money? We then had to refine that concept and look at how it could benefit some of the guys with old money. So we approached Old Money, which was Old Mutual. We said to them, Old Mutual, we think we've got something that can add value to you and help you to reduce, the payouts from the employers. In fact, we're even prepared to sell you a minority stake in the business in return for seed capital. After 9 months of negotiation, them wanting to understand this thing, they got into the idea. Mr. Peter Moyo was the person that we were dealing with at the time. He gave us a 10M for us to start the business. And then they took a 30% stake in the business. And they were going to get involved at a board level as shareholders and also at a board level. We would have a chairman from our company, that is the founders. Old Mutual would then have a deputy chairperson who must look after, money. So the audit committee of the board was chaired by Mr. Trevor Pasco from Old Mutual. Because you see, these people, these darkies, they won't charge the money, No, but that's a tongue-in-cheek comment, guys, so please don't take it badly. But yes, as people who had invested 10M, they couldn't just throw in money like that. They needed to have a close thing, because every board meeting, every 3 months, we must show how we use the money and all of those kind of things, which then gave them a sense of comfort. But for them to put that money, they also asked us to be tied up to the business for at least 3 years. All right. So restraint of trade, basically. So we signed up to that because we didn't have money. After 3 years, if any of us wanted to exit, then we could exit. So that was very, very important. And in the partnership, we said, Old Mutual, you are the biggest insurer, that is, they were the biggest at the time. We can also mine some of your clients as the biggest insurer, and that's what they promised. We will look at the government parastatal space and see if we can get business from there. That was the deal. So when we signed the MOU, we signed the shareholder agreement. When the shareholder agreement came, we didn't see this thing that they were going to give us access to their clients. What's happening, Trevor? Why are we not getting introduced to your clients? And he said, no, but look in that document there. We said we will endeavor to introduce you to our clients. We didn't say for sure. So the first lesson then was, it's important to learn and understand the small print. Don't just get excited when somebody's throwing in money. But what else is there? The other thing they put was preference shares. You know, they like to do that, Old Mutual. Say, okay, we'll put money for this period. Should anything go wrong with the business, you know, we've got pref shares, so that we're just behind SARS as a credit, you know. And so, yes, we had to sign pref shares, which were only going to be converted into ordinary shares, you know, after a certain period. So let me move quickly. One thing I did not mention, somebody who introduced us to Old Mutual and to Peter Moyo was somebody very, very well known in South Africa, top CA person, somebody we all look up to, and I went to church with them. So I said, you become, you know, my mentor and coach, you know, and help us. We will give you something should we get something from Old Mutual. On the day we got a letter from Old Mutual, this person comes and says, well, I had a dream last night that God said El Shaddai Investments, which is part of the church, must take 45% ownership of this business, right? So 30% Old Mutual, 45% El Shaddai, and then 25 is left. So what happens to us? No, the three of you will work for at least 3 years to qualify for the shares. Okay? And then the other 5%, no, that's for staff. No, there's no way God can talk to you and not talk to me. And so I challenged him, and I went back to Peter Moyo. And I said, Peter Moyo, did you make the decision based on an individual or on the strength of the team? He said, strength of the team. I said, well, that person who's a CA, well-known and all of that, is trying to steal this whole thing. I'm mentioning this thing because these are some of the lessons that are important to you guys to understand. So when I said no, and Peter said no, it's strength of the team. But by that time, he had delegated the process of taking this thing forward to a divisional manager, Trevor Pascoe, born-again Christian. So that person, that CA lady, went to Trevor and said, Trevor, I've discarded that initial team. I've got a new team. Can we continue with that investment? Wow. Trevor says, no. I trusted that team because I saw passion. I saw depth, you know, in the team. And I saw a balance of skills, business and healthcare. And so I cannot just take people who have just been pulled into this thing. So it failed. So I faced a Goliath, but I just had to have courage. I had nothing to lose. I had nothing anyway at the time. And so the point is, there are a lot of people that we look up to, that we bring closer, hoping that they will help us as we set up our things. And those people are actually greedy. Sometimes they will even use religion to actually, try and fix, or hijack your business. And that's my experience. Okay. So anyway, let me move much faster. We set up the business. Took us 6 months to get the first client, which was the South African Post Office. In that 6 months, at least, the seed capital came in handy. We started getting more and more clients, but still, the expenditure and the income in the first 3 years was not balancing. So we broke even around 3 years. From that point, we were then profitable and we grew exponentially. We had said we want to have this business being 100M turnover in 10 years. So we grew very close to around 90 by year 12. And then disaster struck. Now the other guys had already left because they had other interests. So we were pitching for some work with the Department of Public Service and Administration. And as part of that process, they need to see a list of all the health professionals that you are using so that they can see that they are registered and in good standing with their professional bodies so that you can give them work. Well, it turned out that one of our doctors, a guy that qualified just a year after me, I knew that he was a qualified doctor because we were in medical school together. It turned out that he was not paying his annual fees to practice as a doctor. Instead, he took an old registration card and just changed it with a typewriter. And, so for 10 years, he had not been paying his annual fees. And so we as a business then got disqualified in a business that was giving 60% of our income. Now that was disaster. Then we wanted to know, but why? Why are you disqualifying us? This guy is an ordinary employee. Well, they gave us the reasons. We went to North Gauteng High Court. We challenged the decision there. We interdicted the process and we demanded a review. So those are some of the things you end up doing to protect your interests. Took a year for that to be resolved in our favor. But by the time it was resolved in our favor, we had lost a lot of money because we were keeping employees thinking this thing would be resolved quickly. All right. So the lesson there is when there is a risk like that, don't sit and hope. Take decisions there and then and say, I don't know how long this litigation is going to take. And I can't be carrying costs of salaries of people. Rather, I retrench them. And if it is resolved in our favor, then I will re-employ them. So the big mistake I did was to sit for almost 9 months carrying the cost, and salary bill is the number one cost driver. Health professionals are not so cheap, followed by, rental costs and technology costs. So I learned a bad, lesson there that if anything threatens the income or the revenue, something like litigation, don't sit, like the stuff that's happening at SAA now or ESCOM, somebody should be reducing the costs. And part of those costs is the people costs. Because if you don't do that, you are just getting into a much more worse situation than you are. Okay, fine. So this thing was resolved a year later and we went back to business, but I had to then do organizational restructuring, cut my permanent staff from 100 people to 25 people, which was huge. Reduce other services and focus on the services that were very profitable. Now, one of the things then is that most people, we say they're good leaders because they lead things that are moving, they're okay. But I think it also is good to learn how to run a business when things are not okay. You don't invite that, but when it does come, it gives you valuable experience. So I got valuable experience about how to deal with a business that is in distress. So basically I had to turn around the business after all of that restructuring. 4 years later, back on solid footing, but now we needed to repurpose the business or re-engineer the business. And in doing that, one had to look at a number of things. I don't know if any of you guys know these things. Are these business life cycle? You know, normally when you start a business, there's courtship with partners. You know, that affair may get aborted at the beginning, or you know, as part of that storming, you know, almost in team formation, you form, you storm, you normalize, you perform. Yeah. So sometimes things don't work out there, you know. So we had survived these things with that accountant and other people. Got to infancy, we didn't get to die. You know, we were up and up, 9 years, 10 years, and then around 15 years, there was trouble, litigation. I thought I had managed all the risks to the business, but I didn't think that a doctor can actually fake, you know, his own license. And it cost us dearly. The point there is, don't trust. Put the interest of the company first. You know, if there's documentation that people need to produce, verify. Don't take anything. People like me, because we come from a profession of trust, it's easy to trust, but I've learned now that no. That thing of trusting, it's a patient thing, not in business, all right? So our business at this point now, after it has been turned around, it's now in this adolescent stage, going towards prime, and that's what you know, at least I've managed to achieve, and I'm hoping that it will continue going that way. Now, one of the challenges about having somebody who was part of starting a business is that at a certain point you overstay, and yet the business needs new ideas, new fresh ideas. So I'm at a point now where I'm looking at, you know, a succession plan where I can be less operational and maybe play a role at a board level so that fresh ideas can come in. All right, so those are the services that we do. I'm not gonna waste time here. So at some point we then said, okay, of the 4 services that we deliver, which one is actually in most demand? And we found that the counseling services are the ones that are most in demand with this increasing mental illness, you know, in the workplace and other psychosocial challenges. So we decided we are going to invest in the employee assistance program and actually grow it to be the one that helps us with our diversification, you know, into other markets beyond the traditional markets of our business, because it's still a growing industry. We had to do, you guys, you know, your SWOT analysis. We all had to do a SWOT analysis about, you know, that space, look at what are the opportunities, what are the threats, you know. So the stuff that we are learning here is actually applicable at a business level. We had to do, you know, Porter's 5 forces, you know, to check, you know, how to deal with supplier power, you know, competitor rivalry, substitutes. You know, nowadays, even big insurers like Discovery are now coming into this space. So all of a sudden, you are competing with big people, and you know, also people are becoming yoke. So they want now indigenous healing things, and so traditional healers now are all of a sudden possible substitutes, and no one thought about that many years ago. So you have to find ways to deal with that. You know, external environment, you know, scanning and seeing what are the things, you know. So these things are important, you know, because you must think in a structured way and continuously every year when you're doing your strat planning, you know, scan the environment, because if you fail to do that, then you'll find that something hits you, like Starterfords, they didn't scan the market well about online purchases. Where are they now? They're not there. All right, so there's many other businesses that are now history because they did not adapt. All right, so as we're moving forward, we looked at, you know, those 2 books. I'm not sure if any of you guys are familiar with them, but I love that book, that Blue Ocean Strategy. Differentiate yourself, come up with something, you know, that will differentiate you, take you further there, you know, where you don't have many competitors and you can charge a premium for the value that you have there. By the time competitors come, you know, you're already even further. But also, I mean, we're dealing with disruptive technologies now. So we had to also look at that in trying to get this business to look at things differently. Oh, you were taking a picture. All right. So those are the two books or strategies that actually were useful for me in now saying, how do we reinvent this business, but following a model? So because we are now in the approaching the 4IR stage, or we've already started, so we need to now say, how do we get our business to be a business that will survive in the digital era? And so those two actually helped. We've just introduced a multi-channel digital platform that is going to be used for people to access counseling. In banking, there's bank anywhere, bank anytime. People don't always have to go inside the bank now. So even in the space of counseling, you don't have to just deal with it through telephony. Now there are other channels that one can use to access counseling 24/7, 365. Just like Uber, you start, with the market that is not really threatening the big guys. And by the time they wake up, you've already taken the market, So those are just some of the things. So yes, we launched in 2019 our first smart EAP solution, which we hope will help us to disrupt, this niche space of employee health and wellness. We're really visible out there, and we are starting to get a lot of new business as a result of that. And Prof is my Facebook friend. So yeah, so sometimes he sees me when I'm posting that, we've got a new client now. All right, so enough about my entrepreneurial journey. I hope there was something that you learned there. But for me, the important thing, choose your partners correctly. Not based on very things, values, but you must first know your own values before you can actually look at other people's values. All right? Look for people who share the same values system as you. Obvious values, there are those that are core, there are those that are, I can turn a blind eye. I'm talking about the core, the stuff that, because one of my guys, the MPA guy from Stellenbosch, impressive. He was working for Anderson Consulting before. Very impressive, good strategist, bad implementer, right? But the problem was his work ethic. He just did not like to work. But now we are equal shareholders. How do you hold him accountable? All right? Because he says, no, but I've got same shares as you, same power as you, you're not going to tell me what to do. Took me a long time to get that guy out of the business once I became a CEO. All right? So choose people correctly. All right? When Old Mutual exited year 13, then they sold their stake to some other guy that I introduced to them. And I thought this guy, was a family friend. That guy, property market, Irishman. And he was going out with my ex-wife. So we had this nice big family. So, okay, I've only got 2 weeks. I've only got 2 weeks to find a replacement shareholder. And I thought, okay, let me look at the people who are loaded around me. And I chose him because he didn't need to go and apply for money from the bank. He had it in his back pocket. Oh, once he was in, he was trouble.
Of course.
He was trouble. The bulk of my business is public sector, SOEs, and issues of PEE become important, So now when you have a business partner who does not understand that it's an imperative, it becomes a problem. And when you've got a business partner who doesn't understand that when you are a non-executive director, you stay there, all right? You don't interfere in the operations of the business. To him, in his businesses, there's no demarcation. But here, there had to be a demarcation. So it was not nice to have him as a shareholder. He made a lot of money out of me because I really needed to get him out. You know, so that's just one issue. The other example, sorry, Prof, I'm taking long.
No.
Right. The other issue was we won a contract at the Gauteng provincial government. We call it a transversal contract. 14 departments that are joined in that contract. So each of the departments are then supposed to sign because they've got accounting officers. Each one has got an accounting officer. So 13 of those departments signed, but one big one decided not to sign. It was Department of Health. Now, that's income of about 600,000 per month that we were not going to get because they were not signing. So, no, this is my government. I cannot take them to court, try to talk to them. 2 years passed. They were just refusing to sign, pleading poverty. But they're supposed to sign. If they want to opt out, they need to get authorization from the national department, and they didn't do that. So after 2 years, I thought, you know what? Let me bring in some big boys. Got Edward Nathan and Sonnenberg, ENS Africa. Let's bring in the big boys. Let's litigate. And when you're litigating, it's not really for the money you were going to get. It's the profit you were going to make during that period. That's what you sue them for, not the total. So we had calculated it at about 14 million or so. All right. So went in, fought, won the battles, and eventually it was settled in May last year. Okay. But now my partner, the Irishman, knew that there's this money that is likely to come. So as part of our, share buyback or sale of share agreement, he said, should you win, I want 50% of that. But he was also desperate, and I wasn't sure if we were going to win this case. But okay, you know what? I just want to come. So I signed, okay, fine, 50%. So when the money was paid last year in May, okay, plus interest at 15.5% from 2013. So that's like almost 20 million, right? So this guy wants half, okay? But I signed. Okay, so I will give him some of it. But then one now needs to understand tax law, all right? And tax, because now all of a sudden, this has to be, the company is being paid, and the company must then pay him. But the company is obliged to deduct dividend tax. It's also obliged to deduct, income tax before it is. So he's supposed to get net after those statutory deductions. As we speak now, we are at loggerheads because he doesn't want me to deduct. All right, the monies that the law says I must deduct. So I'm back at ENS Africa, getting tax advice and legal advice. So the point here is choose your partners very well. When money is in front of the people, they turn and become animals. All right, so it's very important to choose people. So now I heard that there was a discussion around the healthcare space in South Africa. 2 years ago, our minister, Aaron Mutwaledi, said our healthcare system in South Africa is an ICU. Look at the public healthcare system. Now, for a minister to acknowledge that, you have to take him serious. All right? So things that are in ICU, they can go either way. So there's chronic underfunding of the public health system. There's misuse of the money that is there. A lot of corruption, especially around tenders and stuff. There's the issue of medical negligence, which is really taking a lot of money from what was supposed to be used for service delivery. There's infrastructure backlog. There is poorly maintained equipment. Even new equipment is not being maintained properly. There's chronic staff shortages. When we look at our nursing population in South Africa, we've got an aging nursing population. The majority of nurses are over the age of 40. Now, when the ANC came in 1994, in its wisdom, it closed nursing colleges. All right? You know, these things are in the homelands and whatever. Close. Right? Now, 20 years down the line, we are not producing enough nurses as a country. And the nurses we have, they have trouble running when there's an emergency. You know, with arthritis and low back problems and stuff. And some of the good ones are going to the UK. So we have a problem. We have a serious shortage of nurses in this country. And the ones that are there are burnt out. Now you guys understand burnout, yeah? It's now a clinical condition in the occupational health space. You know, there's three things that make burnout. One, you are emotionally and physically exhausted. You've got what we call depersonalization. You no longer feel positive about your work. And then the other one, there's declining work performance. So most of these nurses, they no longer have empathy and all of those things. You go there, they don't really treat you well. It's not really that they were born bad people, but they are actually burnt out. All right, and there's no interventions to help them. So we have a problem. There's poor investments in technology, yet we are in the technology, revolution. The outcomes are generally poor. However, there are pockets of excellence. Not everything is bad in the public sector. All right, there's centers where things are working very well. Sometimes even better than in the private sector. But generally, the system isn't working well. So that's the picture of our public health system. Now, in the private health sector, by the way, 83% of South Africans use the public health system. 83%. 17%, they use the private healthcare system. Okay? So the overwhelming majority of people depend on that dysfunctional health system. Okay. Now, the private healthcare system only covers 17% of the population. It's a very closed market, very concentrated. It's oligopoly. Only three players who constitute almost like 80% of that, or who get about 80% of the market. If you look at expenditure, but this is like long time ago, 2011, 2012, the country was spending 248 billion, okay, combined public and private. But look at that. How much was being spent for the majority? All right. So the public sector was spending 120, below the one that services is 17%. So there's a problem there. All right. 17% of the people are consuming a total amount of about 122 billion. This is 2012. And the 83%, 120, all right? Okay, there's a little bit of money that comes from donors. So that already creates inequity, okay? But I can't really blame people for going private because they are paying their taxes, all right? But they're still opting to dig deeper into their pockets because they don't have confidence in the public healthcare system, all right? But now when the policymakers look at this, they think, no, man, let's just put all of this thing in one pot so that we can balance things. That's why we are now talking NHI. There are merits for NHI, and I'm going to talk about that. But I just wanted to show you some of the inequities. 3 hospital groups make up 87% of the private healthcare market. Right? That's Life, that's Netcare, that's Mediclinic. Right? 3 medical schemes, they make up that one medical scheme has got 55% of the market, which is Discover. All right, so that's a mistake there. All right. Now, if you look at the expenditure in private and in public, per capita, you can see, on average, 2,800 rands per person in the public sector compared to 13,800 in the private sector. So all of that is basically saying it is not sustainable. Okay, so as a result of this, the Competition Commission decided to commission a market, health market inquiry to look at what is happening in the private healthcare sector. Yes, we all think it is working well, but something is not right there. Why are the costs so high? All right. So it was gazetted in 2013. Those were the terms of reference, and they really needed to understand the market and see if there are any issues that are anti-competitive. You know, the financing of healthcare, suppliers, and people like brokers. And what they found is that with medical schemes, they've got very high cost of premiums. They use co-payments. On top of you paying your premiums, you are also forced to dig deep into your pocket. All right? The scheme options are very complex, and sometimes there's deliberate over-servicing by my colleagues. You know, I admit you to hospital even if you don't need to be admitted, because I got lower rates for my rooms in return for pushing occupancy and all of that. So they picked up those things. Some of the costs are not justifiable, you know, like unnecessary admissions, unnecessary scans, unnecessary blood tests. And so more cesarean sections. We are one of the countries with the highest Caesar rate in the world. All right. Part of it is because doctors are scared because you guys now are suing big time. All right. But that has made them now to want to cut people even if there's no need to cut. But also for convenience, because then if you're going to have a Caesar, then I can book a date. Like my daughter has got the same birthday as my mom, and I engineered that this year. All right. So one of the things that came out in that inquiry is that the regulatory environment is not functioning. That is, the medical schemes regulator is not doing what they're supposed to do. So these big players, medical aids and staff, and the hospitals, they're just doing as they please. Hence, I think there's another inquiry that is looking at possible racism and all of those things, but it stems from that. If the regulator was doing what it's supposed to do, you wouldn't be having these kind of problems. So the conclusion by Judge Fundile Nyati was that he's not necessarily convinced in terms of outcomes that private sector is necessarily better. It's got better rooms, you know, better wards, better food, but in the core of clinical outcomes, there is no real, you know, thing. That's what they saw, and there's no standardized means to compare service. So yeah, let's get to NHI. Right now, you see 256 billion there. That's something that was estimated in 2010. Since 2010, there hasn't been any crunching of numbers. All right. To get NHI now working, you're looking at somewhere between, you know, 350 to 450 billion. Now, in a country that is double junk status, and maybe in the next few months, it may be triple junk status, we are actually in trouble, but we want to introduce this thing and we don't really have the money. So that's a cartoon by some guy on Business Maverick. I thought it puts it very well, you know. This NHI thing, it is worrying a lot of people, but it is coming. But it is worrying a lot of people, and when it does come, it's going to create problems. It's, you know, it's based on the Section 27 of the Constitution to ensure that everyone has access to healthcare. The state has a duty to make sure that everyone has got access to healthcare, quality and affordable healthcare. So that's why they came up with NHI, coming from that in the Constitution. And the objective is really to ensure that there's universal healthcare. So everybody can access same level of care across the country, irrespective of your earning capacity. And if you want anything over and above the basic package that you are going to be given, then you're going to have either a top-up medical aid or, you know, even dig deeper to get a proper medical scheme. Now, everybody is going to be forced, because the money is going to be deducted from the employer to SARS, and SARS will pay it to NHI fund. So there's no way, if you are working, you are earning, you are going to run away from paying for NHI. in return for that, there's a package of services that you are going to get. And they will contract different providers, public, private, you know. And so, yeah, so that's the picture. Now, if you want 5-star services with bells and whistles, you're gonna have to dig deep. Now, if, for example,
no, I just want to.
Yeah.
I want to, because you can reflect on this. So we have 25 minutes.
Okay.
So what I want to do is fantastic. Fantastic. It's extremely educative and insightful. I just want to take a few questions. So, you know, between now and lunch, take some questions and give a, you know, especially on the.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's take some questions.
All right. I think let's just take questions. I will.
Yeah. You
I will
can,
talk about
incorporate some.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any questions?
My question is regarding small business struggle with the going to court. Very high cost, and usually it's not anticipated.
Yes.
And the question is, do you really think that the small business courts would be effective in assisting to resolve those matters?
Well, if they were there, but unfortunately, that's one big barrier. So to be able to challenge these kind of things, you must have a deep pocket. All right, and most small, you know, micro and small businesses, even medium-sized businesses. I mean, this thing cost us about 2M, all right? I'm talking about the one from Gauteng government. Before with TPSA, it cost us maybe another 1.5. So getting the courts to assist you doesn't come cheap, and it's a problem. But I think it is something that people need to understand that it's a reality. And if there is some way of ensuring your business so that should that happen, then there is somebody who can assist you. It's something that you can do. Because sometimes people just don't pay you. You've delivered the services. And how do you force them? You need to go to court. So those are just some of the things that I think the government could do to make life easy. To say for small businesses, this is the type of thing if there is this kind of situation. Because we're saying entrepreneurs are supposed to be the future, you know, providers of employment in the country, but things like these actually kill the businesses.
I wanted to find out, your company currently looks at the wealth and the health and wellness of current employees.
Yes.
But we having a lot of issues with people who, after they've retired or resigned, then they're having claims of the company that they were working, whether it's economics or occupational health. How would your company then
All right.
look in that space?
Well, that falls within the space of occupational health. So, you know, all companies should know the risk within their environment. They should identify what we call exposure groups. And when they employ somebody, there must be medicals before, just to get a baseline. And then there must be medicals during the time that they are there, and also on exit, there must be, you know, medicals. Because then by having that, if somebody comes later and says, no, but I had just problems because I worked here, then you can be able to say, this is how your x-rays look like when you left us. Therefore, it can't be us. Or it can actually, you know, be a genuine claim, in which case, under the COIDA Act, Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act, then that person can get, you know, compensation.
Okay, mine, I'm not sure if it's a question. You mentioned something about getting the right partner.
Yes.
Because my take on that is people can change, right?
The values don't normally change. You know, the core of who you are hasn't normally changed. Invest in understanding the person.
Yeah, I get that, but I mean, it's possible that people can change, right? Some things you can miss. The same. So, but my point is,
yeah,
shouldn't we perhaps look at the contractual agreement when you start up a business with someone,
yeah,
and then you become shareholders?
Yes,
bind it to a performance.
No, look, all of those things, you put them there in that shareholder agreement, even in the employment, because the company then employs you, all right? So you also have to sign contracts with the company as employees, even if you are shareholders, you know, owner-managed type of businesses. So there's a lot of stuff that is already there in the shareholder agreement and also in the employment contracts. But if somebody is lazy, he's lazy. If somebody doesn't have ethics, you know. So what I'm trying to say is go beyond their qualifications. Think about, you know, talk to people who know that person. Try and understand, you know, what you know, the kind of people they are.
So in a way, it was like a PPI, PI.
Well, if that's what it will take, because you are tying yourself to this person, and when something happens, you know, it affects all of you. All right. So it's like today is Valentine's Day. If you manage to have somebody, you meet somebody today, you can't marry that person tomorrow. You want to get to know this person before, you know. So what I'm trying to say, well, you can, but so I think doing due diligence, you know, it's always a very important thing. Yeah. Okay. Sis. Assuming you are doing all the right things.
So my question is, what is HS doing to be sustainable in the DHI economy? And so basically, what is the type of thing that you are seeing as an opportunity to grow or to get that level of stability? And if possible, what new markets are you also looking at for expansion? Like, I mean, executive wellness has also become
Okay, I'll answer you. Okay, the question is, can we start with the last one? The executive wellness and stuff. Yeah, when I showed you, but I didn't go to town with these things, but amongst the services that we provide is actually executive wellness. So basically, companies realize that executives are very important people. If any of them just has a stroke or a heart attack, the impact of that to a business can be disproportionate. So they normally invest in annual medicals to make sure that those people are in optimal health to reduce the possibility of sudden incidences like that. So it's part of the policy of the organization that somebody must go through that kind of medical. So we do that as well. Yeah. The first question was, sorry, I forgot. Oh yeah. What about it? Sorry, man. My memory, I'm over 50, so. Yeah. All right, yeah. Remember, one of the difficult things about NHI is that there's very little information coming out about how it's actually going to work. So it makes it very difficult for people who are in the healthcare space to actually position themselves in a way that they can take advantage of the opportunities. But what will happen is that every health provider in the country has to be registered with NHI and define the services that they provide, all right? And then there will be sort of like tenders to say, okay, we want people who can provide counseling services with psychologists and social workers and all of that. So we are positioning ourselves to be able to take advantage of that, all right? But we still don't know what will be the criteria for accrediting service providers under NHI. So we can see the possibility of, opportunities. However, what they are going to do when they contract you, they're going to squeeze you in terms of, your normal rates. You may have to charge 25% of what you used to charge in return for volumes, So to actually crunch the numbers and come up with a clear, a business model to service NHI is still difficult at this moment. But yes, anybody who's in healthcare must be able to position themselves. And when they do get that contract, it must be 24/7, 365 type of thing. Because that's why most healthcare professionals now, they run practices from 8 maybe to 6, and there's no cover at night. So they have to now group themselves into group practices, multidisciplinary group practices, so that they are able to provide round-the-clock services. The individual practitioners are no longer going to be able to survive. Otherwise, they'll have to deal with their patients who have to pay directly to them, but not with the manager.
First of all, thank you for your presentation. Very insightful. I think my question is threefold.
Yeah.
Firstly, is so our professor was telling us that to be a great entrepreneur,
yeah,
you need to identify a wicked problem in the society.
Yeah.
So I've listened to your presentation. I can see where the wicked problem is, but can you clearly define what actually drove your business?
Okay.
And then two, when you started your business, until when do you start making profit? And where was most of that money invested in which departments? Maybe it's research or marketing. And then three, who does your publicity? Is that stock footage?
Which one?
On your presentation. Because I know a black-owned company can actually.
Are you pitching? Well, so right. Look, remember I said we identified that health insurance or life insurance were bleeding with excessive claims from employers. And they didn't know how to stem the tide. Employers on the other side didn't have tools to actually manage that risk. So we then said we can fit between the two by managing the risk effectively for the employer. Then they can negotiate discounts in terms of premiums, but also the insurers, whether it is medical aid, life insurers, there will be less payouts as a result of this unmanaged thing. So at that time, you had, this is now 99, the big insurers had small departments, we call them claims departments. So they were more reactive, processing claims, but there was nothing that was being done at employer level to manage risk. So we then said, we will come and be between these two parties and manage the risk where it's happening so that ultimately both parties can be happy. And so that really was the thing. It's a niche area, so not everybody understands that thing. And the profits, I mentioned that we broke even, by 3 years, and thereafter we were on a rise.
Where was your money mostly spent in?
Well, look, again, in the kind of work that we do was to deliver professional services. The number one, the number one line item in terms of cost is salaries to the professionals. All right, getting doctors, nurses, psychologists, occupational therapists, and all of that. Those people are expensive. All right, and so that was our number one line item. Then and even now. All right, and then the other things followed. So if you want to make sure that the business gets close to profitability or continues to be profitable, you must have a close eye on the cost. So even the model that we use, we have a hybrid model where we've got people who are full-time in the business, all right, as the core. And then, so we keep that low. And then with the peaks and troughs, then we've got people that we bring in. So that's like variable costs, So trying to keep the fixed cost, down, because otherwise, if we've got SAPS as a new client, they're everywhere in the country. We can't employ all of those people inside, but we can contract with them as and when we need them. So that's the kind of model we have: low fixed cost and then variable cost.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to find out what are some of the measures that you're using to gauge whether or not what you're doing is actually making an impact.
Okay. Well, when we contract with these companies, we sign a service level agreement. And within the service level agreement, there are KPIs that we agree on where they measure, you know, the effectiveness. If, for example, we're looking at sick absenteeism as a problem, now in a blue collar environment, sick absenteeism should never be more than 2.5% of the, you know, of the staff. So there should never be more than 2.5% of the staff not at work on account of illness, right? In a white collar environment, 1.5%, right? So, but if you go to a normal parastatal or government department, or even some of the private sector companies, when you look at their sick leave rate, it's somewhere between 5% and 10%, all right? So when we contract, we then say we are contracting that over this 3-year period. Contracts are normally 3-year contracts. Over this 3-year period, we are going to reduce this sick leave rate through doing a number of things to get to, you know, where it's supposed to be. And that is measured on a monthly basis and also on an annual basis, so that if you don't achieve that, then there are penalties. So that's just one of the examples. Also, if you are doing a good job there on what we call incapacity or disability management, then there should be less exits through the pension fund. So by looking at the disability claims rate, you know, of people who are exiting on account of illness, if you are doing a good job earlier by being proactive in the workplace, then there should be fewer people who are exiting on account of illness. That's just some of that. But also cost. We measure how much is absenteeism costing the organization on a monthly basis, and we need to see that reducing. All right. So those are just some of the indicators we look at. But,
you mentioned at the start that you had 3 partners that I'm assuming were equal partners.
we were, yes, we're equal 33, 33, 33.
So looking back, when you were starting your business, would you have allowed Old Mutual to then get a majority stake? Because after they got the 30%, you got a little over 23% each. So now they were the majority.
Well, look, what we needed to do was to have one vehicle that represents the interests of the founders. Okay, so Old Mutual had their 30%. Our entity, it was called Ilinge Strategic Investments. So we were all under Ilinge Strategic Investments. And when you look at that, that's like it's about 70% or so. And then 15% Executive Management Trust and 5% Staff Trust. So yeah, somewhere there. So for Old Mutual, they needed to make sure that they minimize the risk of this thing collapsing. So we had to be in a vehicle that is a well-defined legal persona and not just come in as individuals. Yes.
So at the beginning, you seem to have an interest in both public and private, and then Old Mutual relate and they didn't relate.
Well, in a way, they relate because we didn't understand. You know, this thing, Queen's language, you know, is very difficult. We will endeavor, which is not the same as we will surely do. Yeah.
And it seems like once that happened, you focus purely on SOEs and public sector.
Well, that's well. It was much easier for us to penetrate that market. Yeah, well, part of it. It was easier for us to penetrate the government and parastatal space. I mean, even now that we're diversifying into the private sector, it's tough because an organization like Standard Bank, big bank in the country, we were pitching for work there, competing with you know, an incumbent called iCase, all right, and we beat them in terms of the technologies and everything. It boiled down to now we're more comfortable with them because you guys have not done this work in the financial service. You get me? So it needed courageous leadership to say these people objectively, they have what it takes and better than the people we know. But what people do, well, and usually people in a supply chain that is like us. They sit there And they are more scared to put a black company because then should anything go wrong, they worry about their jobs. But if it is KPMG, all right, and they mess up, it's okay. So some of the people at supply chain don't have the courage to make the right decisions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. What I just wanted to find out, given the fact that we living in a disruption age.
Yes.
You mentioned something around 4R.
Yeah.
Are there any thoughts around in terms of innovation? How is PHS handling issues of innovation to try and safeguard yourself from being disrupted in the future? And secondly, I see that you're focusing primarily on South Africa.
That's the question.
Is there any opportunity that you can actually expand
To the continent?
On the continent?
Well, exactly. There was a question that was asked by a lady there, you know, what are the new markets? Remember, the current clients or clientele is largely employers, right? Now we are moving to insurers, but where our services become value-added services on top of the products that insurers are offering. For example, a burial insurance or funeral insurance, all right? A highly competitive space. And now we are talking to some of the big guys so that some of the counseling services that we have become value-added services to those, so that when there's somebody who has passed on in your family, then members of the family can be able to access that kind of value-added services. So that's what we're doing. But also because we have now invested, we spent about 4 or 5 million in a multi-channel digital platform to provide access even for people who are not necessarily working, because a lot of people in South Africa don't have these employee assistance programs in their workplaces, or they are earning, but they don't know where to access these services. So we are getting into the public, direct to the public type of services. The issue about the continent, we launched that digital platform and we decided to call it Inua, which is a Swahili name for to cure, to heal, to uplift, to rejuvenate. And the intention there is that we are looking to get into the continent. So we decided we're not gonna have a Zulu name or a Xhosa name or a Sotho name. Our intentions is to hit the continent, and that's the language that is spoken most, that is indigenous to this continent. So yes, our plans are to go continental.
Now, next presentation. So I work in the mines, and I think there's also market there.
Yes.
So we must work. I think in our case, we do every year VCT test.
Yes.
And we also check conversions. So this guy this year tested negative, next year positive. So we are doing this. So this year we go the whole year. 0 conversions. Next year we have 10. The other year then we have 1. 1, 1, 1, then 0. The thing is, we don't have an answer because the guys ask us, how did you gain it for 3 years? 0, 0, 0, and the next year you've got 10 people on the tents, the other year 15, and the other year 4 years. So in your case of absenteeism and all that, how do you show sustainability of that? Because
in an HIV program?
No, in your case of absenteeism. Because in our case, we think
it's one of the indicators we look for when you have an HIV and AIDS program for the organization, is to actually look at the sick leave rate for those people, focusing on those people who are actually affected, but also as a group.
But how do you change mindsets? Because sick notes are, for me, the same as conversion. In a sense of lifestyle. I have to change my lifestyle.
Let me put it this way.
I don't convert. How do you then turn it around with the signals? Do you change the mindset, or is it your counseling that helps,
my friend,
to get sustainability?
I think this is one very difficult question, because human beings, you see, knowledge is not equal to attitude and behavioral change. I think so. That's a critical point. Some of the worst alcoholics are medical doctors. Some of the chain smokers are medical doctors. We know exactly what those things do to ourselves. However, with all that knowledge, we don't change our lifestyles. I'm not sure. Are you married? Oh yeah, you're married. Okay. I want to say sometimes, you know, a guy gets lucky, you know, and the condom is here in the pocket. But when the blood rushes that way, you know, there's less here, and he ends up taking a risk, you know. So human beings, even with knowledge, sometimes we don't apply that knowledge to actually mitigate risk, and that's a problem. And anyone who can actually solve that thing, to say how do you ensure that someone with knowledge they consistently practice safe sex, I'm sure they would get, you know, a Nobel Prize.
So what's your success factor in your business in regards to reducing sick notes? Is it because of coaching or?
All right, no. Okay, the success factor there is focusing. There are two things. One, the policies of the organization. That's the starting point, right? Sick notes, they are regulated in terms of the basic conditions of employment Act, Section 22-23, right? So everybody has got access to normal sick leave, right? 5-day week, 30 days, 6-day week, 36 days, right? So everybody's got that. However, you find that now companies, they tend to be generous. So instead of having 30 days in a 3-year cycle, they like 60 days, 90 days. Now, the more benefits people have, the more likely that they are going to abuse it. There's this thing called use it or lose it attitude. So towards the end of the 3-year cycle, they will say, you know what, I still have 10 days. Doctor, please, can you book me? Otherwise, these days are going to lapse. So the issue then is that the policies can be a driver. So we help them to tighten that. Number two, the line managers are the people who are supposed to manage as part of their daily work issues of absenteeism. So we train them. We make them understand why it's important to manage absenteeism, the impact on the organization, but also what are the things that they need to do. For example, there's this thing called the 8-week rule, whereby if somebody is absent for a day or two, because most companies, if you're absent for a day or two, you don't need to give a sick note. But there is something that is called the 8-week rule, whereby if you're absent for 1 day or 2 days, which we call an occasion, if you are absent for more than 2 occasions in an 8-week period, as an employer, you have got a right to demand a sick note and to say, up until I'm happy with your work attendance, you no longer have, you know, that benefit of not having to bring a sick note. So managers are not competent in managing this, and they expect HR to be the one who does that. Yeah. HR supports line, but line thinks HR must manage absenteeism. So that's another thing. We also give line managers certain tools on how to identify possible abuse, but also there are people who are genuinely sick. So how do you get the genuinely sick people to get a program? So we do all of those things, and collectively they help to reduce, you know, the sick leave rate.
Do you also assist in terms of getting people who get medically incapacitated?
Yes.
In that process?
Yes. Yes.
So the assessment.
Yes, all of that. Yeah. So basically, some people, they are ill or injured, and they are so severe, the injuries or even the illness is progressive or life-threatening. And there is a policy that all organizations have either under Provident Fund or Pension Fund that covers for that. That's what covers short-term, like up to 9 months, something called total temporary disability. So if somebody is absent for up to 9 months, then an insurer pays out 75% of that person's salary. Okay. Then there is what is total permanent disability. That is now exit. All right. So what we do then is to evaluate records from their treating doctors and even have second opinion, you know, interventions focusing on functionality, which is a skill that occupational therapists have, not medical doctors. Medical doctors like to think that they know everything. I'm one, but sometimes we overestimate ourselves. So when it comes to functionality evaluation, occupational therapists are the people who are supposed to deliver that. So as part of the second opinion evaluation, we may send the person to a specialist who deals with the heart problem, the cardiologist if the problem is there, plus also look at issues of functionality. If it's an issue of the lower back, same thing, orthopedic surgeon and an OT. Now in South Africa, the number one reason for people to exit on account of ill health is psychiatric problems, number one, followed by low back problems, and then other things like respiratory and cardiac are like number 3 and number 4. And the reason for the top 2 is that there are not always objective measures to actually see that this person has this problem. I've come across people who say they're depressed, but if you send a PI, you see them fishing and doing other things. You know, when they come to see you as a doctor, they bring some Vicks and put it in the eyes, and they start crying and rattling all the symptoms that they read from Google. You see, so psychiatry as a discipline has got that weakness that the diagnosis is based largely on subjective feelings, which other people can actually fake.
Where would you put former president?
Yes, well, actually, okay, no, that's fine. No, I want to answer. I want to answer that. Okay. I want to answer that one. We all know that last week on Tuesday, he was supposed to appear in court, and he submitted a sick note from the military health services, and that sick note actually did not meet the minimum standards of what a sick note should look like. All right, and he did not disclose the nature of illness. But now, if you want to be recused from attending a court hearing, you better disclose what's wrong with you. So there was no disclosure. There were some things that were written and you know, corrected and whatever. Once you do that on a sick note, it's invalid. Number 3, the practice number or the HPCSA number of the doctor was supposed to be there. It wasn't there. So just those 3 things make that sick note invalid. So whether he's sick or not, I can't tell. I'm not a medical doctor. But from that sick note, it's definitely an illegal.
He was on a quad bike. Dr. Fundile Nyati,